Welcome back to the Vibrant Soulful Wellness Podcast. This is your space for simple ideas, practical strategies, and meaningful practices to support more vibrant, soulful living in life and in the workplace. I'm your host, Annie Barrett. For over 25 years, I've guided individuals, groups, and workplaces toward greater well-being and fulfillment, drawing on coaching, lifestyle medicine, habit change science, mindfulness, Ayurveda, and yoga. Each episode offers you grounded, accessible reflections and tools that you can actually use without adding more to an already full life. And I'm glad you're here. So in last week's episode, I talked about habits as alignment. Habits is our theme for the month of May. And we talked about habits as alignment, how our daily choices can reflect what matters most. And this week, I want to take one step deeper into this idea because I've been thinking about what actually allows those habits to become sustainable. And the word that keeps coming to me is stewardship. Stewardship and self-stewardship. Self-stewardship is not self-care in the traditional way many people think of self-care, like, oh, just schedule for yourself, take a mental health day, buy some nice new bath salts. Yeah, those can be forms of self-care, but self-stewardship goes deeper. Self-stewardship is also not about self-improvement, which might mean like, okay, I want the number on the scale to be better in a week, or I want my exercise app to reflect more steps, a higher step count, or I want these markers to look different. And self-care and self-improvement might be things that we do in life, and that's fine. But self-stewardship is different and it's deeper. We think about what is a steward. Stewarding is tending something precious. So you can think of somebody who is a steward and they're taking care of the land, they're taking care of the soil, they're taking care of the trees and what's been planted. And there are different things that steward will do at different times of the year to care for the land so that it can be productive, so that it can be rich and fertile. Stewardship means working with what's available and not depleting. But so often I find that in our search, even for self-care, or certainly in the direction of self-improvement, we might put ourselves on that road towards exerting ourselves in a way that's going to be depleting. And as I work mainly with women in midlife, on the yoga mat, or in coaching, or in groups, I want to focus on working with what's available and amplifying that. So when I work with people on the yoga mat or in a coaching session, I invite that person to meet themselves where they are that day, not on some fantasy island where they should be, not where they were last week or 1 year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago, but exactly where they are that day with life exactly as it is. And for most of us, life isn't really clean and neat. It's probably messy. It's probably complicated. It's probably different every day. What we feel, our energy level, our physical energy, for example, our mental clarity, how clear or how busy our calendars are, that's going to be different. So self-stewardship is to work with ourselves as we are each day. And ultimately, whatever we do, if we're doing a yoga practice, if we are engaging in exercise, if we're taking care of ourselves, if we're doing work, we want what we do to be amplifying energy. Sometimes it's replenishing energy. We want not to drain energy. And that's where a good steward amplifies, tends to the land, makes it more fertile over time rather than depleting it, like with just planting the same crop again and again year after year and not giving it enough attention and watering and fertilization. So, where does this connect with habits? Because habits is our theme for the month of May. As I talked about last week, oftentimes habits are taught as discipline, and we feel like we have to be pressured to crush those goals. And instead, if we turn our lens towards self-stewardship, we ask really different questions. We ask ourselves, what do I need right now in my life as it is, not in some fantasy life, but what I need in my life right now? We ask, what supports me? What supports me? What supports my focus? What supports my energy? What supports my creativity? What supports my body? And when we're doing different things throughout the day, whether it's exercise or whether it's work or whether it's jumping in and doing a volunteer project for a committee, sitting on a board, helping someone in our family, we ask ourselves, is this sustaining me? Can I do this in a sustainable way? Is this depleting me? So stewardship becomes a practice in and of itself, a practice of pausing and checking in. Stewardship becomes a practice of listening. Listening to our bodies, listening to what's happening on the inside, listening to our thoughts. Stewardship is working with what's available, not trying to always add stuff, but working with what actually is available right now, the resources that are available. Our internal resources, like our focus and our energy and attention, all of which we can cultivate daily with things that we do, but also what's available in terms of community support, in terms of support from my core relationships, structures, for example, in my life. Ultimately, as I've been saying, stewardship should be non-depleting. But often, this requires kind of an operating system shift. Because in midlife, many of us recognize, wow, I've been caring for everybody else. If we're parents, we've been caring for our kids. In the workplace, we maybe have been caring for our colleagues. We may be caring for our parents or older relatives or adults or people in the neighborhood. We also may be caring for our partners. So in a sense, we've been being stewards for all these other people. And in midlife, the invitation here is to turn that attention and that stewardship that you've been doing so well toward yourself. But often we find in that moment when I meet a new coaching client or someone new comes to the yoga mat, they may be arriving from a place of being quite frazzled, maybe even crispy at the edge, feeling like there's been a lot of stress and pressure in their lives. They may be on the brink of burnout or well into burnout. And that's when then the invitation is to do a system update. I've been talking about our operating system and how our operating system often needs an update. If you've been running yourself ragged, burning the candle at both ends, then the first thing that we do is just pause. Often I'll say in yoga, pause, soften, and breathe. And even if you're listening right now, you could do that, just taking a nice deep breath in and a long, slow breath out. Feeling into your body, noticing your energy level, noticing and paying attention to how you've been stewarding yourself, right? With rest or not, with work. How have you been eating? How have you been moving? How you've been resting? Stewardship requires listening and pausing that autopilot so that we can come back to what I have been calling more and more the compass of the heart. that self with a capital S, a place that each of us has inside ourselves where her wisdom lives. It's not just that some people have it and other people don't. No, we all have it. But we have to pause, often soften, sometimes breathe and check in and notice where we are. And so as we start to steward ourselves in a better way, we ask ourselves, what's my energy like? And we think about, okay, how do I build my energy? Well, the number one way we build it is through focusing on our sleep. And then as we develop tools for making sleep habits more sound and more effective, that then begins to restore our energy. We ask ourselves, how steady have I been feeling? And then that can become a bridge into a habit around nourishment, around paying attention to the food we're putting into our body. It might take us in the direction of meal planning or taking some more time for cooking and prep, eliciting even support from those around us for that. When we check in with our vitality, then that often becomes a bridge to, am I enjoying movement? Am I feeling tension in my body? What would it look like to move and alleviate that? And sometimes movement is about softening and becoming more mobile, and sometimes movement is about visualization. Sometimes movement is about creating steadiness through strength building. And for almost every woman that I've talked to, there's a checking in with our nervous system, just noticing how we're feeling, how calm or not calm we're feeling, if there's a little bit of anxiousness that's been creeping into our life, if there's a little bit of depression been creeping in, and recognizing how we can tend to our nervous system. And often that's through taking breaks, doing breath work, doing meditation. Sometimes it's also with talking to a professional. And so all of these become ways in which we're stewards, right? Stewards of our energy, stewards of our steadiness and attention, stewards of our vitality, stewards of our nervous system. This then becomes the way in which we care for our creativity. So this stewardship, listening, pausing from autopilot, checking in with the compass of our heart, finding our way to self with a capital S. And that self with a capital S is going to feel like maybe a little pocket of groundedness or a little pocket of clarity or a feeling of calm. It may feel like confidence. It may feel like curiosity, right? All of these mean that we're getting a little closer to that place inside ourselves that's the compass of the heart. And so I invite you to think about the habits, the things that you do day to day as, again, not something that you have to tick off and do, but instead the choices that you make to be a steward for yourself, self-stewardship. And the question I might ask of you is, where are you being asked to steward yourself right now? Where are you being asked to steward yourself right now? Is there an area of your life, your vitality, your creativity, your energy, your focus that could use a little attention? And let that be then the entryway into you thinking about that sustainable care. And over time, when we practice this kind of self-stewardship, something deeper begins to unfold. And that's really beautiful. That is the beginning of a deeper and more fulfilling relationship with yourself. Okay, that is my nugget for today. And I'm glad you're here listening. We're going to keep building on this. And if you're curious, where am I going with all of this? Well, a lot of these ideas are going to end up in the book that I'm writing, which is a book for women in midlife. And it's a book that's very much about the topic we've talked about today, about self-stewardship. I look forward to dropping in more ideas around that. And I look forward to your ideas. Maybe you have something that you'd like to share, a reflection back to me of something that I might think about that would enrich our conversation going forward. In any case, I thank you for taking the time and listening to the Vibrant Soulful Wellness podcast. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe wherever you listen: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube. If you want to stay connected with me and what I'm writing about, thinking about, talking about, you can visit vibrantsoulful.com, where you can join my weekly newsletter. You can find links to these episodes and explore additional resources to support your well-being. And I thank you for being here. I hope to see you next time.